Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Health Movement Podcast. We're going to be diving into the topic of nutrition today, breaking down the basic macronutrients of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, explaining their roles and how to balance them for optimal health. We'll also talk about practical tips on how to eat clean, whole foods, and how important those are, and especially to avoid things like refined sugars. Most importantly, we'll also explain why diets overall are crap and they're not really good to try and follow. So, as always, we're not doctors. Consult your doctor, your physician before starting any sort of program or anything like that. Let's just dive right into it. So, why is nutrition important? Seems like an obvious topic. Proper nutrition decreases the chances for all the leading causes of death in the US, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, everything that makes up those top causes of death in the United States. It helps boost immune system, enhances mental health, gives you better energy, helps with sleep. Your cognitive function is better, you get better skin, and also helps with your longevity. Thoughts on that, Timmy?
I think this is probably I would say the most difficult or the most complex area that we'll probably discuss, right? I think nutrition is the one thing that is probably most difficult to dial in. I think, well, not the most difficult, but the most difficult to understand, or what people have the hardest time understanding
And I think when you
is
say dial into talking about consistency, it definitely is tough. I mean, you work out for an hour a day, that's not hard, but when you're trying to eat well for the other 23 hours or whatever it happens to be.
and I think the other thing too is, like, you can know generally what is healthy eating, right? And it's knowing it and doing it are two different things. And I think that's where you see a lot of the disconnect is a lot of people know that they're not eating healthy, or a lot of people know that they're not doing the right things nutritionally. They just don't necessarily know how to make that change. Yeah, like you said, consistency, or the mentality of the mindset piece of the nutrition stuff is definitely a hard follow for some people. And it's, that 80-20 rule that we talk about, or making sure that you're moderating what you have, and the good and the bad, right? Too much of a good thing can be bad as well. So,
Yeah.
you're making sure that you're moderating what you're eating, and you're making sure that you're, doing the right things there. But, I think the big thing is carbs aren't the enemy. I think people love to make carbs the enemy, right? And you need to
And
make sure that
even fats in that regard too. People hear the word fat and they think it makes them fat. And while yeah, certain things can, your body needs good healthy fats in order to operate properly. So if you have a no fat diet, like that's gonna mess you up. You need all three of those macronutrients in some regard and some level in order to be overall healthy, which is a lot of times people don't understand. And I think it goes back to what we said in the first episode. I don't think it's that people are necessarily lazy, or they don't want to do it. It's an understanding that they don't have. I'm talking to somebody, I won't embarrass them by saying their name, but I was speaking to somebody who wanted to put on muscle, and we talked about, all right, in order to build muscle, you need to be in a calorie surplus. And his response was, yeah, when I want to get more calories, instead of drinking Diet Coke, I drink regular Coke. And I'm like, all right, the idea is right. You're getting more calories in, but it's not necessarily the calories you want to get in there. So it's understanding all that stuff that makes a huge difference. Which kind of leads into the next part is what is proper nutrition? What's it mean to eat clean? You mentioned the 80-20 or 85-15 rule. What is it to eat clean? What is that?
For me, I think it's a mostly plant-based diet, right? With some good lean sources of protein in there, right? So lean animal protein. I'm a big proponent for a variety of fruits and vegetables, right? And you talked about the macronutrients, but you also have the micronutrients, right? You have the vitamins and minerals and all that stuff that you're going to get from a wide variety of fruits and veggies. So that's where you want to start. I think it's diversity is a good thing in your diet, and I think
And
the biggest thing.
nature right there helps us out with the colors of the food. Like if you can eat a rainbow of fruits and vegetables, you know you're getting different micronutrients throughout that. So it kind of helps you. If all you're eating is orange vegetables, then obviously you're missing all the greens and reds and yellows and all that sort of thing.
And I think you see that with, the chicken and rice diet, right? Like you see the chicken and broccoli, or like the right the yes, you're getting your macronutrients and you're getting the right, appropriate amount of grams and all that stuff, but what are you getting for the micronutrient? What are you getting for the diversity of your fruits and veggies and stuff there? I think that's where you really need to start to branch out a little bit and get a little bit more exotic and a little bit more willing to try it, right? That's the word I'm
Yeah,
looking for, but I can't find it.
willingness. And
Yeah.
that we always talk about consistency and how important that is. If all you're eating is chicken, broccoli, and brown rice, consistency is going to be tough. But if you're having chicken a couple days a week, you have a steak one day, you have, a lean burger one day, you get some fish in there. If you have a variety of things that are all going to get you to whatever end goal that you have, if you're looking to hit 185 grams of protein a day, and all you get it is from chicken, that's not sustainable. You're going to be miserable. But if you can have, eggs for breakfast or a protein smoothie, and you get like turkey sandwich for lunch with some cheese, and you have salmon for dinner, like it's a variety, and that's going to make things so much easier to be consistent.
Well, and you mentioned the smoothie too. The smoothies are a great way to be able to kind of nutrient pack, make a nutrient dense kind of meal and be able to kind of put a bunch of different types of things into a smoothie, and you can palate it maybe a little bit better, but also you can get all kinds of fruits, veggies, supplements, all that kind
Flaxseed,
of stuff.
even you can get
Yeah,
some kale in there, whatever you need to put in there.
yeah,
Definitely,
yeah. I'm a
definitely
big
need.
I'm a big I'm a big proponent for like some spinach. You get some iron in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can really divert. Like talking about the diversity of your food, you can really get a diverse number of ingredients in there, and really and it's a good way to start the day. I feel like it's for me, that's kind of like my routine is either eggs or a smoothie in the morning, consistently. But at the same time, it can be a little bit time consuming, I guess, trying to put it together.
yeah.
So you typically what I'll do is I'll put it together at night, wake up in the morning, I just pop it in I pop it in the fridge. I take it out in the morning, put my oat milk in it, and then drink it that way. That way, it's good to go, and it's nice and quick. I get up
One
early,
thing
so
I
it's
found that's super quick in the morning. My two go-to breakfasts are the same exact thing. I'll either do a smoothie or some eggs. And I forget who it was. It might be Jeff Cavalieri, who's from Athlean X. He's an athletic trainer, super fit guy, and he is a huge proponent of just the box egg whites. So you just pour out, and there's nothing wrong with egg yolk. It can have cholesterol and those sort of things, but it's just so convenient to pop open something, pour a cup of egg whites, and throw it right in the pan, as opposed to you have to break up 4 or 5 eggs. Huge difference, and the price is honestly about the same. But I know if I pour in a cup of egg whites, I'm getting 25 grams of protein from that. And then if I add cheese to it, some avocado, doesn't have a ton of protein in that, and maybe a piece of toast, something like that. I'm getting 35, 40 grams of protein with that breakfast right away. And it's all natural foods. I'm not pouring a bowl of cereal or anything like that, which I'm not gonna lie to you, a bowl of Reese's Puffs is sometimes just what I want. But it's that again can be a treat. That can be in the 15 or the 20% thing. I don't
keyword.
recommend that.
The
It's
keyword is the keyword is sometimes, right? Like that's the
sometimes, yes. And it's
and that's
honestly,
that's
it's not the best thing first thing in the morning, because you get that processed sugar and everything. So you get that huge glucose spike, and
the
then it
insulin
crashes a
spike.
couple hours later, and then you're just fighting the rest of the day. But honestly, every now and then it's not gonna be too bad for you. And
You
then
know that kind of goes to what I was going to say next is like the grocery shopping aspect, right? That's where you got to really focus on the perimeter, shop the perimeter, stay to the produce, stick to the natural ingredients, right? You don't, and we mentioned it in the last podcast, but like you don't want to have a laundry list of ingredients on your food that you can't pronounce, right? Like you don't want those big long like chemical reaction,
Oh yeah.
in your food. It's like that's the stuff that's gonna, it's packed with carcinogens that's just not healthy for you in a multitude of ways, not just the sugar and all that stuff too. So it's
Even
just trying to.
something I didn't realize this, but even something like shredded cheese in a bag, the additives they put in that so that it doesn't clump, it's so much healthier to get a block of cheese and shred it yourself. And if you've ever done that, you notice it clumps. So they're putting
Yeah.
something in that, which I mean that's a specific example, and you can have shredded cheese from a bag, and you're going to be, long term, it's fine. But if you make a bunch of those little changes and just notice those little things, in the long run, they definitely add up. It's like if you're saving for something, you cut out a Starbucks coffee in the morning, and then you don't stop at Cumberland Farms, and grab a Gator or whatever it happens to be. You cut back in these little spots, and they definitely add up over time. But yeah, like you said, long list of ingredients. If it's coming from a box, chances are it's been produced and it's got additives in there to make it last longer. The best things are around the perimeter: potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. Those complex carbohydrates that take longer for the body to digest will leave you feeling fuller longer, and you're not as hungry. If you have those simple sugars, or the processed sugars, things of that nature, your body goes through that pretty quickly in terms of the digestion in your stomach. And then you feel hungry and need to eat again much sooner. So you're fighting a constant battle of being hungry. If you have the foods that fill you up, it's a lot easier to eat a decent amount of food. And I'm not saying you should only eat 1,200 calories or something insane like that. You need to be eating throughout the day, but there's a big difference between consistently eating 2,000 to 2,500 calories, or bumping that up to 4 to 5,000 calories, because that's gonna make a huge difference. And usually those extra calories are the unhealthy ones that have other side effects that you don't really want in your diet. And that
Yeah.
brings us back to the word diet, which I think we should probably talk about a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing is like, I'm not a huge proponent for people fad dieting. I mean, the one thing I will say that is positive to that is it gets people thinking about what they put in their body or what they're putting in their mouth, right? And I think that is the benefit to that. But I think that could be the, where my benefit stops, right? Like I think
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you look at, the when the Atkins diet was big with the cutting carbs, or the big thing with like the keto stuff, right? And it's right or wrong. I'm just not a huge fan of it. Like people are going to do what they want to do, but again, I think the biggest thing is that people will just start to pay attention to what they're eating and what they're putting in their body, and then from there you can start to build on your foundation of what falls within your guidelines of what you can eat, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's
And I,
where I think another piece to it too is portion control. I think that is a major aspect to this too, right? Of like, do I think I said it in the last one, like people that you can't eyeball a piece of chicken and be like, all right, that's 6 ounces, right? Or that's 4 ounces of chicken, like, or like what does, like you said, 45 to 50 grams of protein. All right, well, what does that look like in the form of chicken or beef
the only way to know that and to learn that is to measure it, or to find some. A lot of people say you take your fist. Everybody's fist is different, but if you get a food scale and
Mhm.
you measure out 8 ounces of chicken, you only have to do it a couple times, and then you have an idea. I remember when I was, a couple of my friends were going through the whole bodybuilding process, and they were explaining it all to me, and they were prepping their meals, and I was like, oh, I'll try this a little bit, and I was putting stuff in, and I was showing one of the guys, and he's like, Derek, that's, you're way off. Did you measure this? I'm like, no, but I think it's about right. And I thought I had 8 ounces of chicken. It was like 4. So if you're gonna do it, honestly, if you take a couple weeks and really focus on it, you'll know what it is going forward. Maybe a year later you forget, but then you measure it again, be like, oh, I got to refresh my memory. So that definitely helps with being consistent. And the thing with diets, like you're talking about, to have a diet, it has to be restrictive of something. Atkins diet restricts certain things. Keto restricts certain things, and your body needs some of everything. And if you restrict it from having certain things, then it's not growing and not performing the way that it should. And also another terrible thing about diets is there's usually an end date. Like I'm going to be on this diet till I get to the wedding or till I get to, I don't know, my class reunion. What happens immediately after, though, is you learn how to do that diet, but it was a pain in the butt and you hated it. So now once it's done, you go right back to the way you were. So instead of a diet, you need to think of a lifestyle change, and you need to find those foods and things that are healthy most of the time that you can be consistent with. And we keep going back to that word, but that's the biggest thing, is consistency. If you're consistent with what you eat, you're great.
Well, and I think people want to believe it's going to change overnight, right? And
Mhm.
that's just not how it works. I
That's
think
a good point.
it's it's not going to be, all right, I'm going to change this all at once and it's going to stay that way. I think that's probably the best way to guarantee your failure. I think that's, something that you're gonna you're setting yourself up for failure, right? I think that's where it needs to be small incremental changes over time to start to make a impact on it's going to change a lot of things, right? It impacts what we eat, impacts our energy throughout the day, it impacts our sleep, it impacts how we recover, it impacts all of these different things. It affects our cognitive ability and in our our brain processing power and all that stuff. So it's you start to dial in and you start to get these good micronutrients, and you're fueling yourself correctly, and then it starts to turn into, all right, well, now I'm starting to really get the basics down. Now how can I maybe dive a little bit deeper into it? And I think that's where you need to start somewhere, is the whole
Yeah.
thing,
Oh,
right? I think
absolutely.
it can be daunting. I think you look at the biggest, like, what are the challenges that face people from eating healthy, right? And I think if you look at that, the number one thing, it has to be convenience, right? Like, I think,
Oh, absolutely. Have something
like,
that you
if
can
it's
grab out of the cupboard and it's in a package and you can just eat it on the go. Like it's definitely, it takes more planning and a more of a time commitment to eat well. But that being said, too, you could throw 5 pounds of chicken in a crock pot, and then there you go. You've got a bunch of chicken ready. Freeze 4 pounds of it, and then pull that out as you need. And then there are different things that you can do, different hacks you can have that will make it easier. But I mean, nothing's going to compete with the convenience of packaged food or things like that, or just like I'm hungry, I'm going to swing by McDonald's. And honestly, if you want to do that once a month, twice a month, something like that, and that keeps you going, I think I mean, knock yourself out. If that fits into what you want to do, that's great. But in the long run, like you said, it's consistency and it's a long game. So if you can be incrementally 1% or a half of percent better each day over a long enough time period, you're going to reach your goal. If you can be 2% better, you may get there faster. But if you just consistently try to improve or try to be a little bit better each day, over a long enough timeline, you're going to get where you want to go. So that's a huge thing. And I forget, we took a ton of takes on the first one, so I don't remember what I said on the one that we finally settled on. But Usain Bolt, who's world's fastest man, all that, Olympic gold medalist, was saying he trained 4 years to run for 9 seconds. And people give up when something doesn't go well after a month. Like this isn't a thing that you're going to do for a week or 2 weeks or a month. Like you're looking at the rest of your life. So if every month you get a little bit better, think about where you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. That went by in the blink of an eye. Think about the last week, how quickly that went by. So if you can be better just a little bit, 2, 3, 4 years down the line is going to get here really quickly. And at that point in time, you're going to be thanking yourself for doing those little things.
Yep.
I don't know. So I just wanted to touch on what the actual macronutrients are. We briefly went over those, but just talk about what they are and what they do. We have our proteins, we have our carbs, and we have our fats. And we mentioned fat gets a bad name. If it had a different name and it wasn't associated with being fat or overweight, then I think it would be easier for people to eat. But fats are definitely the most concentrated form of calories. You get 9 calories per gram of fat, whereas proteins and carbs, it's 4 calories per gram of fat. But fats help with a lot of stuff. They'll help with your cell function and hormones. They help with your brain function. They protect your organs. They help regulate body temperature. They help with digestion. There's a lot of things that goes on with why fats are needed throughout the body. But it's just unfortunate they're named what they're named.
I mean, and I think, but that's like the name comes like from the origin, right? So it's like
Yeah.
I think it's just. I mean, it's not. I don't want to go down that wormhole, but at the same time, like I feel like it's something that it's just an educational thing. People just don't understand,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's
But
where
I mean,
it's
if you take any process, like if you have too much sugar, which is a carbohydrate, that's going to get changed into fat when the body stores it. So it's you're right. It's education and understanding. Like people drink orange juice because they think it's healthy, but if you look at the amount of added sugar in normal orange juice that you find in the supermarket, it's really, really not healthy at all for you.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's like the if you look at the have you ever seen the like the where they show like a can of soda and then like how much added sugar is put into a can of
oh
soda
yeah,
or like all that stuff like that's where people like if you were to see the actual when you put it in visual terms like that, I think that's where really it really starts to hit that maybe these things aren't in soda and all that stuff are something that I've cut out years ago. But at the same time, like it's like that carbonation. Like so, I mixed in. I started drinking seltzers. You know what I mean? So I'm a
yeah,
we're strictly a seltzer home at this point. So it's like just making small little changes like that to what say you're gonna and I'm not bashing pasta here like we'll get into the carbohydrates but people I feel like people really love to make carbs the enemy but those are the type of carbs that you should be trying to limit, right? The pasta, um
yeah.
the empty carbs, right? The carbs that don't hold a ton of nutritional value. I think that's another one where you talk about fat gets a bad name, but I feel like carbs are starting to get a bad rap nowadays too. You know what I mean?
I
And it's like
agree. I agree completely. And your body needs them. Like you absolutely need carbs. That's your main source of energy. Short term energy. You hear people carb loading before a race or something like that's a real thing. Your body uses carbohydrates as energy. If you get them from good sources, sweet potatoes, vegetables, whatever it happens to be, that's great for you. You don't
Mhm.
need to cut out carbs. If you're chowing down 2 pizzas a night, like those are not the carbs that you want to consistently be eating. But yeah, there's difference with those. And then the last one, protein, is huge. I mean, that's key for muscle growth, bones, cartilage. It increases the serotonin, which helps you regulate your mood and sleep and your appetite. So you need some of all of it. Protein's definitely tough to get in because it's the most filling. If you're trying to eat 200 grams of protein in a day, like dude, that's hard. That's not easy at all. And you see stories of like guys like Chris Evans or somebody who's like trying to get jacked for these superhero movies and they are miserable. Right? Like people's job is to just keep coming and bringing them food and they're just eating pieces of chicken and they're miserable. Talking about the meat sweats, but it's just not like you don't have to go to that extreme. We're not all superheroes. We don't all have to try to be, but it's definitely another thing that the body needs for sure. Um, all right. We do have a section on here where we answer listener questions. We have 3 of them we're going to go through today. This first one is from Jennifer in New York City. And she says or asks, what do you feel are appropriate portions for females seeking to maintain muscle mass, and how often should one be eating throughout the day? This was muscle mass, and as well as just overall maintaining their I guess their lean body mass. In terms of protein, it's the same. You take your grams of protein per pound of body weight. That's what you want. And then to pick on like how many calories you need to eat throughout the day, it's completely dependent on the person, their activity level, and things like that. But it should be between roughly 1,600 to 2,400 calories, somewhere in that range. Some people will need more. You really shouldn't go down to the 1,200 or 1,000 calorie range. Supper alpha. Your body needs fuel. So if you're down that low on calories, you really need to reverse diet, build some muscle to build up your metabolism so that you can take in more calories. And then when you go into a caloric deficit, let's say you only eat 1,000, you can bump that up to 2,000 a day. Now your caloric deficit's down to 1,600. So you're eating a healthy amount of food, which is tough for some people to hear because they want to be at a certain weight or look a certain way. If you're eating healthy carb or healthy calories and you're increasing your exercise, you're doing resistance training, you're trying to build muscle, you can take on those extra calories and not gain a pound if you're working out and doing the things you should. But you should not be down to 1,000 calories a day in a cut, because your body's going to adjust to it. And then the next time, if you want to tone up a little more, what are you going to go down to 800?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can't.
It's an input versus output thing, right? And I think that's where people really get hung up on. They're not mutually exclusive. I think I think the big thing is like, oh, people are like, oh, I exercise, I exercise a lot. And it's like, all right, well, especially when you're talking about either maintaining body weight or losing, gaining or losing, maintaining, whatever. It's understanding the amount of calories that you're burning in a day on a daily basis. Like you need to wear some sort of tracker, a fitness tracker, whether it's a Whoop or an Apple Watch or an Aura Ring or something along those lines that gives you a general idea of what your movement looks like in a day and how many calories ballpark that you're burning in a day. And then it's starting to do the math of like, all right, well, this is where, we talked about the food log last time too, of keeping a food log would help to track, all right, I've had this amount of calories, over the course of the last week. I've averaged, say 1,800 calories a day. And it's like, all right, so this is, look at your output of what you're using for energy or calories per day, look at your input of what you're taking in, and then it's, you just have to adjust both of those to find the sweet spot for you. It's like you're talking about, if you're trying to maintain, then it's really just keeping it, hovering around a balanced, calories burned versus calories, you know taken in. And then, whether you're looking to gain weight or gain mass, then it's, you're gonna want to have you're gonna want to be in a surplus of calories versus a deficit, right? And that's where it's just knowing what, half of it's just, what's your goal, what are you trying to work toward, and then, how do you make that happen, and how do you put that into practice? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think we talk about mindset and how important that is too. And I think some of it is that people have this negative relationship with food where, like, I can't eat that because this will happen. And if you can just shift that mindset, like, all right, I know I need to eat. And if I eat this, these are the benefits of it. If I eat this, and it could be physical benefits, and maybe like your family's going out to ice cream, and like that's a fun time for eat the ice cream, like that while it might not be physically the best thing for you. And again, if it's in that 20 or 15% of the time, it has psychological benefits, it has like bonding benefit. There are good things that happen. It's not just, we have to look at internally what happens in our bodies too, but if you're just aware of overall why you're eating the things that you're eating,
Well,
it
in
makes it a little easier.
contextually too, I think if you were to break it down and say like, all right, in a given month, if you were to say, hey, we're gonna go out for ice cream, or we're gonna have ice cream 20% of the time, or 20 maybe 20% of the days of a month, right? Well,
Yeah.
20% is 6 days a month, right? That's almost an entire
Yeah.
week of time that you can have a bowl of ice cream, right? And I think that's where it's
Yeah.
like 6 days is a lot. Like if you look at it, like that's a good amount of,
It really,
you know
it
what I mean? And
really
it's
is. So you have to make sure you're good on the other days, but like work in what you got to live. Like this isn't like I'm going to be strict for the rest. No, like you got to be disciplined, but
think of it
that's what the 20% is there for,
in
15%.
and liken it. And I think I said this last time is like I think last time I said use your food log as like an ATM, like a bank statement. But that's what you have to do. You have to budget those things, right? You have to budget. All right, well, you have to make those sacrifices, just like you have to make, when you're saving to go on vacation, like we are, right? It's like you have to make certain sacrifices to cut things out to get to where you want to be, or to achieve the things that you want to achieve. It's really just making sure that you're consciously making the effort and putting a plan in place to be able to do that. And I think that's more than half the battle, is just having the
Yeah.
plan. And and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's the other piece, is people want it to be perfect, and it's never I think especially like, I think for me, it's my diet is perfect on work days, right? Like on during the week, and when I'm in my routine, and I can kind of get it down to a science. But then you hit the weekend, we're kind of all over the place. I've got a little boy, so we're like all over the place. Like right now, where we have sports, we have all this stuff on the weekends, or we're going to like birthday parties and all this stuff, and that's where I get out of whack, is when I'm out of my routine. And that's where, for me, it's like I need to learn how to dial that in a little bit better, or I have to be a little bit better in those areas, and I know that. So it's knowing that when I'm outside, like days like today, it's a Saturday where I don't really have much going on. I don't have a lot of structure happening, so it's like I need to make sure that I wake up. I had my eggs this morning, and I was able to kind of kickstart a little bit of a routine and stay in my routine a little bit. And that's where I stay successful, is when I'm in that routine, and I'm being consistent in all that stuff. I think that's where you start to see people kind of fall off, is with that. That day to day is, it's easy to
The
be consistent.
unstructured
Yeah, and
times.
it's
And
easy to
yeah.
be consistent for a week. And this is where you're talking about, that week can turn into 2 weeks, and then I think what is it, something like 18 days for something to become a habit. It's something along those lines,
Yeah.
right? It's
So
like 3 weeks,
18, 21, something like that.
something like that. So I think that's where you need to start to really focus on how you can be consistent, and understanding
Yeah.
that being consistent is going to be inconsistent sometimes, right? And I think that's
Yeah. Yeah. I think, sorry, Jennifer, I think we went a little long with your answer there, but basically 1,600, 2,400 calories, you're going to be somewhere in there.
rambling on.
The next question we have goes along, and we kind of answered it, so we don't have to talk too much to this one. But this is from Nancy in Atlanta. If I have a huge calorie deficit of 500 calories every day, I'm afraid my body is going to stop burning fat because it will store the calories that it has. What do you suggest? And with this, 500 calories is actually, that's a fine deficit. Your body's not going to go into shock or anything like that, and save and keep the stored body fat. It really comes down to what you're doing. If you're still doing resistance training, if you're still exercising, then your body needs to repair those muscles. So it's going to take the calories you're putting in, and work to regain those muscles. If you're eating only 1,000 calories a day, though, as we said before, you got to ramp up your metabolism. You got to eat more. You got to reverse diet. You've got to work on resistance training to build the muscle up, so that you can build up your metabolism, and so that you can go on a proper caloric deficit where you're not risking getting too low. But 500 calories, nothing wrong with that in terms of caloric deficit, if you can still maintain a decent amount. Again, don't go down to 1,000 calories a day. And then the third question, we all know high protein is important for muscle building. Can you explain the difference and why there is a difference between getting your protein from powders or in bars versus like chicken and eggs, something like that? And this is Stevie. She's a girl from Mansfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah, I mean it's all about, I mean, we talked about convenience earlier, but it's all about like and you talked, you spoke to, it can be difficult to try to get that amount, your daily intake strictly from, lean meats, or healthy, that source. I think that can be, a lot of it's mostly convenience. There is some science behind absorption and um how you process the different types of protein, right? I think you see people like, some people have digestion issues, and it can be, hard for them to break down the different types of, like, that's why you see people use the pea proteins versus the whey proteins, because they're not
Yeah.
able to, there's some digestion issues, the stuff there too. So that's something that you see a lot with the protein intake type
And
of
I
stuff.
I think another thing, and you were mentioning micronutrients earlier. When you eat a piece of steak or a piece of fish, you're not just getting protein. You're getting a whole slew of all other things that are good for the body that you're not going to necessarily be getting from a whey protein powder or a protein bar or something like that. So, I mean, you could theoretically, you don't need any of those things. Like, you don't need whey protein, you don't need protein bars, you don't need any of that stuff. You could get in incredible shape just eating natural foods. Where the other things come into play is the convenience. If you're having trouble getting your calories in or your protein in, and you have, a couple scoops of protein and mix it with milk or water or whatever you want to mix it with, that's going to help you get the calories in. So I would say get as much as you can from natural sources so you can get those other micronutrients in there, and then substitute the rest with the convenience stuff. So
Yep.
that kind of brings this episode to an end. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate all the time you guys have been here. Time is definitely the most valuable thing that you have to give. So the fact that you're here with us, for those of you still here with us, we couldn't appreciate it more. The next episode, we're going to be talking more about fitness and explaining certain things about that, and give a big overall episode about fitness there. So join us with the next one. Thank you so much for coming.
We'll see you guys next time.
Call it a day. All right. Thank you.